Redefine the Line: How a Quasi-Relative Poverty Measure Accurately Identifies Need by Maggie Nolan and Kaylee Yavorsky. What is poverty? Is it a lowness of income, the absence of dignity, social exclusion due to financial limitations? Let's hear the thoughts of the students here at Washington and Lee University.
Poverty is when people don't have the things they need to live, but also to have the potential to live the way they want.
Poverty is not knowing where your next meal is coming from.
It's like scraping by true life, not knowing what your future is going to look like.
Whether it's a family or a person who just doesn't have the same amount of resources that a normal person would. They don't have the same access to things that people should have in their life.
When you don't have the basic necessities to live, food, shelter, water.
Is people living below the poverty line.
Able to support your basic needs and your family's basic needs, so not being able to afford things like food or shelter or basic health care.
Many people, like most of those in this video, think of poverty in physical objective terms, such as the lowness of income or the lack of resources to meet basic needs. However, poverty extends beyond economic deprivation and mere financial realm. Poverty is the lack of sufficient combined capabilities to lead a dignified life due to financial limitations. To accurately identify those experiencing poverty, the government should employ a quasi-relative measure, such as the SPM. Let's break this down. In identifying poverty, it is important to look past numerical data and consider one's functionings and capabilities. Functionings, as defined by philosopher and economist Amartya Sen, are one's doings and beings, the various things that one manages to do or be in leading a life. They are the actions that one completes and the roles that one takes on. Functionings range from walking a dog, eating healthy, and studying for a test, to running a business and being a mother. Capabilities, on the other hand, are the functionings that an individual has the actual ability to complete. They are the actions that one has the substantial freedom to partake in, the roles that one has the true opportunity to take on. Some examples of capabilities are being able to practice good health, being able to affiliate with others, and being able to relax and engage in recreation. Capabilities are not simply one's freedoms granted by law. In fact, one's capabilities often differ largely from one's legal rights. For example, all natural-born American citizens over 35 have the right, according to the Constitution, to run for president. However, after considering factors such as economic constraints and educational requisites, only a select number of Americans have the capability to run for president. While analyzing one's functionings may be useful for research purposes, functioning-based poverty measures do not accurately identify those in need. What one has the substantial freedom, the true opportunity to do each day, differs widely from what one actually does. Extremely wealthy people, for example, could have the opportunity to spend hundreds of millions of dollars and simply choose to live on a modest budget. Sen illustrates this point in a scenario where one man is starving and another is fasting. Both men are not eating food, so both men are engaging in the same functioning. However, the fasting man has the capability to eat, while the starving man does not. Society must not define someone who can eat but chooses not to eat as poor. Analyzing one's capabilities provides greater insight into his or her poverty status than pure financial data. One's income level, for example, is not always indicative of his or her economic status. One could be earning less than $5,000 a year but have over $5 million in real assets and another $10 million in savings. That is not to say that financial components are not necessary. Without financial qualifications, poverty would be understood as any factor that threatens a person's basic capabilities. Although a person who cannot receive medical treatment due to a pre-existing condition was in an unfortunate situation, they were not impoverished because no amount of money could alter their situation. Their circumstances present a serious issue, and attempts to solve their problems should be welcomed, but they should not be considered impoverished. Capability-based poverty measures with financial components will most accurately identify those in need. Now, let's look at which poverty measurement, structurally, is most efficient. There are three main categories of poverty measurement: absolute measures, relative measures, and quasi-relative measures. Absolute measures are defined by John Iceland as an attempt to define a truly basic absolute need standard. Supporters of an absolute measures view poverty as an objective concept and believe that there is a specific dollar amount with which one can survive. Absolute measures are simple in practice and use concrete thresholds such as gross annual income to identify one's poverty status. The United States utilizes an absolute measure called the official poverty measurement, or the OPM. The OPM is based around the poverty line, which defines a concrete dollar amount with which one can survive on. It considers one's gross annual income and cash benefits. Iceland articulates that with the OPM, a family and its members are considered poor if their income falls below the threshold for a family of that size and composition. The poverty line is calculated by multiplying an average family's budget for food by 3. The OPM is adjusted for inflation with the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, annually. While the OPM has reached a level of consensus throughout the nation and therefore is a valuable research tool, it contains various inefficiencies. The OPM only uses gross annual income and cash benefits to identify poverty. First off, income can be deceiving. As said before, one could be earning a meager income but have a great wealth in assets and savings. Besides, the OPM leaves out factors that affect disposable income, such as non-cash government assistance, taxes, and medical care costs. Similarly, the OPM does not consider expenses necessary for holding a job, such as child care expenses and transportation costs. The OPM is outdated. It does not take changes in spending patterns into account. When it was created, people spent 1/3 of their household income on food. Now, housing and transportation costs each require a larger share of the family budget than food does, but the OPM still uses that cost to set the poverty line. In addition, the poverty line is not adjusted for different standards of living across different geographical areas. For example, a person living in Manhattan, where the cost of living is very high, is expected to live off the same amount of income as one living in rural Tennessee, where the cost of living is much lower. The OPM receives criticism for its basic unit of measurement, the family, as well. It considers a couple that lives together to be two separate entities, ignoring a couple's sharing of resources. When it was designed, the OPM was not created for long-term use, but rather temporary and emergency use when funds are low. This in itself is a red flag. In principle, a poverty measure should not be designed around the amount of funds available. A poverty measure should simply identify those in poverty. Actions to remedy poverty should be entirely separate from poverty measurement. Relative measures used in many European nations consider poverty to be a condition of comparative disadvantage. Supporters of relative measures believe that poverty is relative to, in Iceland's words, a society's existing level of economic, social, and cultural development. Those considered to be in poverty may be able to fulfill their basic food, clothing, shelter, and utility needs for survival. They will not, however, be able to fully take part in society. They would be left out of relationships, social activities, and social organizations. These measures are popular in high-income nations where people's basic needs are widely met and poverty-related deaths are uncommon. In relative measures, the poverty threshold is commonly set at 50% of median income. As incomes rise, the poverty threshold rises, and as income falls, the poverty threshold falls. These measures help to combat the high costs associated with holding a job, such as childcare expenses, transportation costs, and high real estate prices in job-dense areas. Relative measures have some faults. Many criticize that scientific reasoning, not value judgment, should drive changing notions of who is poor. If one's basic FCSU needs and capabilities are met, regardless of how his neighbors are doing, he or she is not experiencing poverty. Others find it amiss when using these skills, there will always be a group of people that is considered to be in poverty. Poverty will never be solved in this case. Even if the worst off earn an adequate amount to cover their FCSU needs and basic capabilities, they will still be deemed impoverished. In addition, relative measures do not always fluctuate in cohesion with the business cycle and the overall economy. In times of recession, median income decreases and the poverty threshold is lower. Then relative measures reflect misleading poverty rates. For example, if the median income falls from $55,000 a year to $45,000 a year, it will appear as if thousands of people escaped poverty when they did not. Relative measures are a happy medium between absolute and relative measures, combining aspects of both. These measures are valuable in that they include subjective judgment as well as scientific evidence. The Supplemental Poverty Measure, or the SPM, is a prime model of a quasi-relative measure. It is currently used in the United States as a research tool and is far more comprehensive than the OPM. First off, the SPM broadens the definition of a family to include all those living at a single address, thwarting the issue of cohabitors that pool their resources together. It then sets its threshold at a dollar amount spent on a basic set of goods. Its threshold is set at 33% of expenditures on food, clothing, shelter, and utilities of consumer units with exactly 2 children multiplied by 1.2. This includes FCSU costs and leaves wiggle room for other personal care, household supplies, and transportation expenses. It is updated every 5 years based on moving averages and spending with the Consumer Expenditure Survey data. The threshold varies for different family types and across different geographical regions. SPM takes gross annual income, cash benefits, and non-cash benefits assistance into account. It also considers taxes, work expenses, and out-of-pocket medical expenses. When choosing how to measure poverty, society must not defer to what is the most feasible in practice, but choose what is most accurate in identifying one's poverty status. It is also important to note that what we choose to measure does not always reflect our end goal for taking measurements in the first place. For example, the OPM puts a large emphasis on income through the poverty line. Its end goal, however, is not to see who is making the most amount of money. The end goal is to identify who has the ability to meet their FCSU needs and basic capabilities. The ideal poverty measure is a quasi-relative one that enacts the SPM while using the OPM as a research tool. The poverty line, adjusted for geographical differences, non-cash government assistance, and taxes, should remain to gauge economic change. A final recap. Poverty is the lack of sufficient combined capabilities to lead a dignified life due to financial limitations. To accurately identify those experiencing poverty, the government should employ a quasi-relative measure, such as the SPM. So, why does this all matter? Only with a solid understanding of poverty can one craft the most efficient solutions to it. Only with knowledge can one eliminate the prejudice and negative stigma surrounding poverty in the nation. In order to move forward in eliminating poverty, the mass population must be educated on how to accurately define and measure poverty.